So my name's Erin. I'm the director of Zenobia in Chains, which is a short film about a girl who is working in a convenience store when she's visited by two strangers, and she kind of has to decide what kind of person she wants to be. Yeah, definitely. So I think I have a real like love-hate kind of relationship with like horror films and thrillers and also neo-noir films. Because on like a purely kind of aesthetic or like visual level, I really love them. Especially the lighting in like neo-noir films, like Only God Forgives and Drive. But at the same time, I really hate them because for so long, and honestly still to this day, I feel like those aesthetics are very much like dominated by men. Like I feel like women are kind of pigeonholed into only being allowed to make like dramas or romantic comedies, which I have no interest in like making personally. Um, so I think it's kind of frustrating that while I really like the look and atmosphere of like these genres, the actual narratives really frustrate me because they've been dominated by men for so long. I think there's so many like sexist tropes that are really frustrating and really strict like gender conforming roles. And so I think for me personally, I kind of want to usurp those very male created kind of tropes. So I definitely kind of drew on my own experiences. So like my parents didn't go to college, and both sides of my family are very like blue collar, and it was kind of frustrating that for me at least to get into a place like Northwestern and then they're really only interested in like when are you getting married, because for a lot of more like lower income families, marriage is it's a very strict like expectation, I think, for women to get married young and start having kids. But I think something people don't realize is that it's also like for financial stability. So I feel like if you're from, a more like a lower socioeconomic status family, you're used to having this really strict expectation to like if you're a woman to get married young because it means dual incomes, it means like lower tax rates. Um, and so I think I was really definitely inspired by like my own family, not really caring that I wanted to go to school and get a degree and just wanted to know like when I was going to get married. And then I worked at a 24-hour Walgreens when I was in high school, and I it was so terrible. There were just sometimes you would just get like really creepy men coming in like late at night, and you're kind of like there by yourself and you're just like running this cash register and you're really hoping they're not going to like give you a hard time. Yeah. I definitely understand the criticism or the critique that it's like too slowly paced. I think what I was thinking when I wanted to make it that way was making people sit in discomfort at these like very they're not overtly dangerous necessarily like moments or exchanges, but if you've had one of those experiences, you do know how uncomfortable it is, whereas people who may not have had those like specific life experiences, they don't know how discomforting it is. So I think adding that like drawn out pacing, an audience member who hasn't had that experience is literally sitting there like, what's going on? Like, why is this taking so long? And it's almost like physically uncomfortable, like you wanted to cut to another scene. And I definitely faced pushback, from my senior directing module when I was making this. I felt like a lot of people were like, why does it need to be, it's like 24 minutes. They're like, why does it have to be 24 minutes? And I was like, I want to take up all the space that I can. Like, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too into it or I'm jumping to conclusions, but it really felt like, oh, well, this is like a woman's film and it needs to be fast and over with quickly. Like, women aren't allowed to take up space or time. And so when we started the class, they said we weren't allowed to have films over 20, like over 22 minutes. And I was like, well, I'd rather have a cut that is more effective at making people uncomfortable than like a shorter version that isn't as effective at creating that kind of like environment. Yeah. I knew, kind of like drawing from my own experiences, I wanted it to take place in what looked like a rural or semi-rural kind of setting. And luckily, where I was going to school, we were kind of like in a town or a city, but we weren't too far from like some smaller towns. And so we, for the convenience store, it was really the only place within like a 2 hour radius that would let us shoot there. For some reason, it was like really, which I can understand why, because there's, that kind of like fight scene in the convenience store. And the owner was really nice and it had a really specific look, and we kind of just got lucky with that. Um, and then for the cinematography, I think I was really lucky to have a cinematographer, Elliot Nick, who was like very willing to support kind of my vision and some of the things that I really wanted to do. I was worried the cinematographer, I would, wind up going with a cinematographer who was purposefully like limiting or who wasn't willing to kind of try new things. But luckily the DP was very willing to like, sometimes on set, I was like, all right, I know it seems really long, but I want to do like, a 2 minute take of something. And I think that was really lucky. And I felt like he did the perfect job as a DP in that he was like supporting my vision, not he was trying to change or take over in any way. Yeah. So I'm really interested in kind of exploring like the structure of film itself and the way that we structure stories and narratives. One movie that I haven't seen it in a while, but when I saw it, I remember I really liked it, is The Place Beyond the Pines. Um, yeah, which kind of I think it really explores the idea of like why do we like movies that have only one protagonist? Like why do we usually like structure movies chronologically? So I was really kind of interested in exploring that, and I think I was also really interested in exploring the way kind of like the interconnectedness of like, or the shared almost trauma of like being a woman, and how it is very much like Zenobia's story, but in a way we wouldn't really care about her story if we didn't have the woman's story also. And how I think I don't know, in America it's very easy to like, or we really prioritize like individual narratives. So um we kind of like the phrase pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's very like you're responsible for yourself, and like you don't have like a shared experience with anybody. It's like so individualistic, when really it's like things like class and classism or sexism and racism, they're like ambient traumas that different people share. And I think I wanted to use the narrative to kind of explore how those, while in the US we might act like those are individual experiences and like you're individually responsible for how you take care of those issues, it's really like a shared experience between like across generations and across like individuals. Yeah. I once when I was home, I grew up like outside St. Louis, and so one like spring or winter break, I was home and I went to the St. Louis Art Museum and I saw this statue It was actually a model that the artist had originally created to later make an even bigger statue. And it was called Zenobia in Chains, and it was sculpted by a woman during like, it's like the Baroque renewal period or something. Like I think it was like the late 1800s, and it literally stopped me in my tracks because I was like, I've never seen. It's like a Greek revival statue too, so it's like white marble, very like classically done, and it literally almost like shocked me because I didn't know like women were allowed to make sculptures like that at that time. And Zenobia herself was maybe not Greek, but she was like an empress in like 500 BC or something, and she was captured by the Romans or like defeated by the Romans. So maybe it wasn't 500 BC. It doesn't matter. But and she's actually like a pretty common trope in art, like Zenobia. Um, but whenever she's sculpted or painted by men, she's always like cowering and a lot of times like naked and ashamed and like hiding her face. And this specific statue, which was done by a woman, she isn't like that at all. She has her shoulders like back and her head is like kind of lowered in defeat, but she's also just like standing very tall. Um, and so it was really jarring to me to see like a woman's piece of art about a woman. And I think that was just like very, it was a real like aha moment. I think I literally was like, okay, now I know I want to make my senior directing film about, because I've been really like struggling with the story before. But then I saw that and I was like, now I know what to do. Working on Zenobia, and having kind of like a full year to dedicate myself to it, I really learned to don't be afraid to experiment, especially if you're a student. I think when you're a student, that's really the time to kind of experiment and try new things. And you should really focus on like the process and not that the final outcome. It really is kind of about learning how you work best as like a writer or a director or really any like creative position. And if people try to convince you not to do something, don't be afraid to, politely stick to your guns. Yeah, that's my advice.